My name is Ellie Hart. I'm 31 years old, and last Thursday, my mother stood on my doorstep, dressed in her best clothes, holding a bouquet of white lilies, and asked to hold her grandson. She was smiling. She was glowing. She called him the greatest blessing. She said she'd been telling people about him for months, her friends at church, her coworkers, my father's golf buddies. Apparently, little Noah was the pride of the whole family. There was just one problem. I don't have a son. I don't have a child at all. I never have. And the grandson they'd been bragging about to anyone who would listen was a lie they created. Not me, them. And what I did next, what I said to her, standing there with her lilies, on my doorstep with a camera rolling behind me, ended 30 years of their carefully constructed reputation in a single afternoon. Stay with me, because this story doesn't start last Thursday. It starts 15 years ago, on the coldest night of November, with a suitcase at the end of a driveway and a 16-year-old girl who had no idea she was about to become invisible. My name, my full name, is Eleanor Marie Hart. I grew up in Millhaven, Ohio, small town, the kind of place where everybody knows your parents before they know you. Population about 12,000, one high school, 3 churches, and one family that everyone in town looked up to. Mine. My father, Gerald Hart, ran the most successful insurance agency in the county. Hart Family Insurance had been around since my grandfather opened it in 1971. By the time I was a kid, my dad had 20 employees, a corner office on Main Street, and a leather chair he never seemed to leave. He was important. He knew he was important, and he made sure everyone else did too. My mother, Patricia Hart, people called her Patty, was the definition of what small-town Ohio called a perfect woman. She ran the Women's Auxiliary at St. Michael's Catholic Church. She organized the 4th of July parade for 9 consecutive years. She brought casseroles to sick neighbors. She chaired the school fundraising committee. She was beloved. She was everywhere. And at home, she was a completely different person. I want to be careful here because I'm not telling this story to make them into monsters. I'm telling it because you need to understand who they really were, before the casseroles, before the church pew, behind the closed door. They had 2 children. My brother, Robbie, Robert Gerald Hart III, was 4 years older than me. Robbie could do no wrong. Robbie was the football captain. Robbie got into Ohio State on a partial athletic scholarship. Robbie's picture was on the wall in my dad's office. And then there was me, Ellie. I was the other one. I don't say that for sympathy. It's just the truth. From as far back as I can remember, the rules in our house were different depending on who you were. When Robbie missed curfew, my dad laughed it off. When I came home 10 minutes late, my mother sat at the kitchen table and said, I still remember exactly how she said it. You are a reflection of this family, Eleanor. Act like it. When Robbie failed his sophomore history class, my dad hired a tutor. When I got a B- in algebra, my mom made me sit at the dining room table every night for 2 weeks doing extra problems she printed off the internet. And I was 12. But here's the thing I've never been able to explain fully. Not then, not now. The favoritism wasn't just about attention. It was about control. My mother controlled everything about me. my friends, my clothes, my hobbies. In 6th grade, I wanted to join the school art club. She said it was for kids with no ambition. In 8th grade, I made the junior varsity soccer team. She made me quit because she said the girls on that team had questionable values. In 9th grade, I told her I wanted to be a graphic designer when I grew up. She laughed. Not cruelly, not loudly, just quietly, like I'd said something naive. Designers don't have stability, Eleanor, she said. You'll be a teacher or you'll work at your father's office. That's what the women in this family do. I was 14 years old when she said that, and I already felt like a prisoner. By 15, I had started to pull back. Not rebelliously, not loudly. I just got quiet. I found things that were mine. A sketchbook I kept under my mattress, a best friend named Dana who lived 2 streets over, and a boy named Marcus Webb. Marcus. I need to talk about Marcus, because he is part of what made everything that came after possible, and also part of what lit the fuse on the bomb that my family detonated. Marcus Webb was 16, a year ahead of me in school. He was quiet, thoughtful. He read paperback novels and kept them in his back pocket. He didn't play football. He didn't go to parties. He was the kind of boy that my mother would have called going nowhere. He was the best thing in my life. We started talking in October of my sophomore year. He sat next to me in the library during study hall because every other seat was taken. He was reading Steinbeck. I was drawing in my sketchbook. He looked over and said, "That's really good." 3 words. And somehow they meant everything, because no one in my house had ever said them about anything I created. We were together by November, and my mother never knew. Because I knew. I knew in my bones that if she found out, she would end it. So I kept him secret. I kept him the way I kept my sketchbook. Hidden, private, mine. For 5 months. Until the morning of April 3rd, when everything ended. I found out I was pregnant on a Tuesday morning. I was 16 years, 2 months, and 11 days old. I took the test in the school bathroom at 7:42 a.m. before first period. I remember the fluorescent light buzzing overhead. I remember the cold tile under my sneakers. I remember sitting on the floor of that stall for 15 minutes, staring at 2 pink lines that were rearranging my entire life. I didn't cry. I think I was too shocked to cry. I told Marcus that afternoon. Behind the school, by the maintenance shed where the groundskeeper stored the lawnmowers. He went white. He was 17 years old. He sat down on the curb. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. And then he said, "Whatever you decide, I'm here. Whatever you need, I'll do it." He wasn't running. He wasn't panicking. He just held my hand. For a week, I didn't tell my parents. I barely slept. I went to school. I came home. I ate dinner at the table and answered questions in 1-sentence answers and prayed that somehow this would resolve itself without me having to say the words. It didn't. My mother found the second test, the one I'd hidden behind a box of winter sweaters in my closet. It was a Saturday, April 14th. I was downstairs doing homework when I heard her footsteps on the stairs. I knew from the sound. Not fast, not panicked, slow, deliberate. The way she walked when she had made a decision. She came into the kitchen. She set the test on the table between us. She didn't yell. That was the first thing that surprised me. Her voice was completely flat when she said, "When did this happen?" I told her. I told her about Marcus, about how long we'd been together, about how he wanted to be involved. I was trying to give her good news in the middle of bad news. She listened to every word. And when I was finished, she folded her hands on the table, the way she folded her hands at church, and she said, "You have two options. You terminate this pregnancy and we never speak of it again, or you leave this house." I felt the room shift. "Mom, those are your options, Eleanor." I don't want to." "Then you leave." "Mom, I'm 16. You stopped being a child the moment you made this choice." I stared at her, and I realized, in that moment with total clarity, she wasn't talking to her daughter. She was doing damage control. She was thinking about what people would say, about the women's auxiliary, about the church, about Heart Family Insurance, about the reflection. I said, "I want to talk to Dad." She said, "Your father agrees with me." And that stopped me cold, because I hadn't even spoken to him yet, which meant they had already talked before they came to me. They had already made the decision. My father came home that evening. I tried again. I sat across from him at the kitchen table with my mother beside him, and I said, "Dad, I need you to hear me. I'm scared. I need help, please." He looked at me, and I will carry that look for the rest of my life. Because it wasn't angry. It wasn't sad. It was inconvenienced. He said, "We love you, Eleanor, but we can't let this damage what your grandfather built. Your mother gave you your options. You're giving me an ultimatum to get rid of my baby." "We're giving you a choice," my mother said. "That's not a choice. That's a threat." "Then you know what to do," she said. And she got up from the table. I went upstairs. I sat on my bed. I looked at the sketchbook under my mattress. I looked at the poster on my wall, a print of a Van Gogh I'd bought with babysitting money at a craft fair. I thought about what it would mean to stay, what I'd have to do to stay. And I thought about the girl in the bathroom stall on April 3rd, sitting on cold tile, holding two pink lines. And I thought, that baby is not a problem to be managed. I packed one suitcase. I took my sketchbook. I took the cash I had in my desk drawer, $83. I took my school ID, and I walked downstairs. My mother was in the kitchen. My father was in the living room watching television. I stood in the hallway. I said, "I'm leaving." My mother didn't look up from the sink. She said, "That's your choice." 3 words. The last 3 words my mother would say to me for 10 years. I walked out the front door. I stood at the end of the driveway in the November cold with one suitcase. I was 16 years old, and I called Marcus. He was there in 11 minutes. He drove his older brother's car. He got out and he looked at me, standing there with my suitcase in the November wind, and I will never forget what he did. He didn't ask questions. He didn't say, "I told you so." He just picked up my suitcase and put it in the trunk, and he said, "My mom has a pull-out couch. You can stay as long as you need." I got in the car. I didn't look back at the house. I wish I could tell you that's the moment the strength in me was born, but honestly, That night, on the pull-out couch in the Webb family's living room, listening to Marcus breathe on the floor beside me because he refused to make me sleep alone, I cried so hard I couldn't make a sound. But here is what I didn't know yet. I didn't know what my parents did next. I found out 3 weeks later from a girl at school whose mother ran the church auxiliary with mine. While I was on that pull-out couch, crying silently, my parents had already told everyone I had moved to live with my aunt in Portland. They'd invented an aunt. They'd invented a whole story. And they had erased me. Just like that, as if I'd never existed. Here is what survival looks like when you are 16, pregnant, and completely alone. It's not dramatic. That's the thing no one tells you. It's not one big crisis. It's 1,000 small ones, every day. Marcus's mother, Carol Webb, was a heavy-set woman with reading glasses she kept on a beaded chain and an absolute refusal to let anyone in her house go hungry. She worked as a medical billing specialist for a group of family physicians on the east side of town. She was not rich. She was not even comfortable, really. But she sat me down on my second night there and said, "You are not on the street. You are not going back to people who threw you away. We will figure this out one day at a time." I started crying again. She handed me a tissue and said, "Finish crying and then come help me make dinner." That was Carol's philosophy. Feel it, then work. I stayed with the Webbs for 4 months. Marcus got a job at the grocery store. He worked weekends and 3 afternoons a week. Carol helped me enroll in the alternative education program at the county office so I could keep my credits. And in early August, on a Tuesday that was so hot the air shimmered off the pavement, I gave birth to a son, 7 pounds, 4 ounces. I named him Noah James Hart Webb. He had dark hair and enormous eyes and the smallest fingers I had ever seen. I was 17 years old, and I was more in love with something than I had ever been in my life. But loving him and providing for him were 2 very different things. The alternative education program helped. Carol watched Noah when I attended classes, but we were crowded, strained. I watched Carol doing math on the back of envelopes at the kitchen table at night, and I knew we were running out of room. When Noah was 4 months old, a social worker named Ms. Denise Farrow connected me with a transitional housing program for young mothers in Columbus, 40 minutes from Millhaven. It meant leaving Carol and Marcus. It broke something in me to go, but it also opened the door to everything else. The transitional housing program was called Stepping Stone. 2-bedroom units, shared laundry, caseworkers. I moved in on a January morning with Noah in a second-hand car seat and 2 garbage bags of our things. My unit had cream-colored walls and a window over the sink that let in the afternoon light. I sat on the floor with Noah in my lap in that empty little apartment, and I thought, this is ours. It wasn't much, but it was ours. Over the next 4 years, here is what I built. I completed my GED by 18. I enrolled in a 2-year design program at Columbus State Community College. I waited tables 3 nights a week at an Italian restaurant called Carmine's on 5th Avenue. The good tips paid Noah's daycare. I learned everything. I learned how to budget down to the dollar. I learned how to make soup last 3 days. I learned how to say no to things that felt like shortcuts but were actually setbacks. I learned that I was good at design, really good. My professors noticed. One of them, a woman named Dr. Keiko Tanaka, who wore paint on her hands every single day, pulled me aside after a class critique in my second year. She said, "You have an instinct that I don't see very often. Don't waste it." I did not waste it. At 20, I transferred to Columbus College of Art and Design on a partial scholarship. I brought Noah with me because I always brought Noah with me. He was 3 years old. He liked trucks and scrambled eggs and a stuffed elephant named Gerald, which was funny and also a little sad in a way I didn't let myself think about too much. Marcus was still in my life, though not in the way we'd been at 16. We'd grown up differently. We'd had to. But he showed up on weekends sometimes and took Noah to the park, and we'd sit on the bench and talk about our lives like two people who had been through a war together, which, in a way, we had. Here is something I want you to understand, because I know what you might be thinking. You might be thinking, she must have tried to reach her parents. You might be thinking, surely when the baby came, they softened. I want to be honest with you. I tried twice. Once, when Noah was 3 weeks old, I wrote my mother a letter. 3 pages. I told her about Noah. I told her his name. I described his face. I said I didn't need money or apologies. I said I just wanted them to know he existed. The letter came back. Return to sender. They hadn't opened it. The second time was when Noah turned 1. I drove to Millhaven. I parked outside the house on Elm Creek Road. I sat in the car for 20 minutes. And then I watched my father come out the front door with a golf bag over his shoulder. He walked to his car. He didn't look up. He didn't see me. Or maybe he did. I'll never know. I drove home. I never tried again. By 22, I had graduated from CCAD with honors. I had a portfolio that Dr. Tanaka helped me refine over 6 months. I applied to 14 positions. I got called back by 4. I was hired by a mid-size branding agency in Columbus called Meridian Creative Group. Starting salary, $41,000. I cried in my car in the parking lot after the offer call. Not from happiness, exactly. From relief. From the knowledge that the thing I had been building, brick by brick, since I walked out of that driveway at 16, was actually standing. I'm going to do something the world doesn't always make room for. I'm going to let myself be proud. Because what came next was earned. Every single piece of it. By 24, I was a senior designer at Meridian. I led rebranding projects for 3 regional healthcare networks and a national retail chain. I was good at this. Not just competent, good. The kind of good that makes clients request you by name. By 25, Meridian promoted me to creative director. At 25 years old, I was the youngest creative director in the agency's 18-year history. My salary jumped to $87,000. I moved Noah and me out of our 2-bedroom apartment in Clintonville into a 3-bedroom house in Bexley, a beautiful, quiet neighborhood with old oak trees lining the street. Noah had his own room for the first time. He decorated it himself. He was 8 years old, and he chose dark blue walls and space-themed curtains. I painted the first wall with him. We were laughing so hard we got paint on each other, and neither of us cared. That night, I sat on the back porch of my own house in Bexley, Ohio, and I drank a glass of wine, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Just peace. At 27, my life changed again. Not because of work, because I met someone. His name was David Okafor. He was a civil engineer with a firm in Columbus. 30 years old, Nigerian American, from Cincinnati originally. He had a steady laugh and the kind of patience that doesn't come naturally to most people. He was also, it turned out, completely undone by Noah. They bonded over building Lego sets. That was it. That was all it took. David would come over for dinner and end up sitting on the living room floor with an 8-year-old, arguing about the correct way to build a space station. I would stand in the kitchen doorway watching them and feel something warm and enormous in my chest. By 28, David and I were serious. By 29, we were talking about our future. By 30, he proposed on a Saturday morning in our kitchen while Noah was pouring cereal. He got down on one knee. Noah looked at David, then at me, then back at David, and said, very serious, "Does this mean I get a dog?" David said, "Absolutely yes." I said yes too. We got married in June. Small ceremony, backyard, 30 guests. Carol Webb was there, in a yellow dress, crying into a handkerchief. Marcus was there with his fiancée, laughing at everything. Noah walked me down the aisle. He wore a little blue suit and held my arm very seriously, like he understood the weight of the moment. And I looked at the people in those folding chairs, Carol, Marcus, Dr. Tanaka, who flew in from Columbus, colleagues, friends, people who had chosen to be in my life, and I thought, this is my family. This is what family actually is. By 31, the age I am now, here is where I stood. Creative director at Meridian, with a team of 12 designers under me and a salary of $112,000. A house in Bexley that David and I owned together. A 9-year-old son who made honor roll and loved drawing and had a Labrador named Cosmo who destroyed exactly 4 pairs of shoes in the first year. A husband who called me E and always made the coffee and never once made me feel like a burden. And absolutely no contact with Gerald and Patricia Hart of Millhaven, Ohio. For 15 years, I had been dead to them, and I had built a life so full and so real that some days, most days, I forgot to grieve it. But they had not forgotten me. It turns out they had been thinking about me quite a lot, and in the spring of my 31st year, I was about to find out exactly what they had done with all that thinking. It started with a phone call, not from my parents, from my brother Robbie. I hadn't spoken to Robbie in 11 years. He'd never reached out when I left, never written, never appeared. He was the heir apparent of Millhaven, and I was the ghost. But on a Thursday evening in March, my phone rang. Unknown number. Ohio area code. I almost didn't answer. I don't know why I did. Ellie? I knew the voice immediately. I sat down at the kitchen table. Robbie. Silence for a moment, then, I know this is a lot. I'm sorry. What do you want, Robbie? He exhaled. Mom and Dad want to see you. I laughed, not a funny laugh, a hollow one. After 15 years. I know. They erased me, Robbie. They sent a letter back unopened. I know, he said. Ellie, I know. I was there. I know what they did. And I'm not proud of how I handled it. I should have reached out sooner. I should have. What do they want? Another pause. They want to meet your son. And there it was. I felt something cold settle in my chest. How do they know I have a son? Mom has a Google alert on your name, he said. She found your wedding announcement. There was a photo. You were with a little boy. I pressed my hand flat on the kitchen table. Noah's drawing of Cosmo was hanging on the refrigerator. I looked at it. They want to meet him, I said slowly. Ellie, Dad had a heart procedure in January. He's fine, he recovered, but it shook them. Mom especially. She's been talking about you. She used the word reconcile. She wants to reconcile. That's what she said. Does she understand that reconcile implies she did something wrong? He was quiet. I'll take that as a no, I said. Ellie, I need to think about it. I hung up. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. David found me there 20 minutes later. He read my face immediately. What happened? I told him. He sat across from me and listened to everything. When I was done, he said very carefully, "What do you want to do?" I don't know yet. Whatever you decide, I'm behind it. Whatever you need. I looked at him. He sounded exactly like a 17-year-old boy in a November driveway. Some things, I thought, don't change. I didn't call Robbie back for 2 weeks. In those 2 weeks, something strange started to happen. I started hearing things. From an old friend in Millhaven who still followed me on social media. She sent me a message. Hey, so I don't know if you know this, but your mom has been telling people at church you have a grandson. She keeps referring to some little boy named Noah as her grandchild. Just thought you should know in case it's private or whatever. I read it 3 times. My son's name. She was telling people at church that Noah was her grandchild, without my knowledge, without my consent, without my existence as far as the people of Millhaven were concerned. And then another message, from a woman I barely knew, a cousin by marriage who lived in Cleveland. Congrats on little Noah! Your mom mentioned you've been letting your parents spend time with him. That's so sweet that you reconciled. He sounds amazing. I stared at my phone. Letting your parents spend time with him. They were telling people we had already reconciled. They were telling people Noah already knew them. They had built an entire narrative, a whole fictional relationship, without asking me, without contacting me, and without telling anyone in Millhaven that 15 years ago, they had thrown their 16-year-old daughter out into the November cold for refusing to end her pregnancy. That's when I understood. This wasn't about reconciliation. This wasn't about guilt. This was about their image. My father's heart procedure had scared them, and they needed, before the obituary was written, before the pastor gave the eulogy, before the reading of the will, they needed to close the loop. They needed the story to have a happy ending. They needed to bring the estranged daughter home, fold her into the family photo, and hand her a grandson she could deliver on cue. They needed Noah, and they had already, in their heads, decided he was theirs. I put my phone down. I was very calm. I said out loud, to no one in the room, "Okay." And I started making plans. 3 days after I got those messages, Robbie called again. I answered on the second ring. I didn't let him speak first. "Tell me everything," I said. "Tell me exactly what they've been saying, to who, for how long." He hesitated. Then he told me. It was worse than I thought. They had been telling the story for 8 months. 8 months of Ellie's doing so well. She married a lovely man. She has a beautiful little boy. We've been in contact for a while now. We're hoping to visit soon. 8 months of building it up at church, at the Rotary Club, at the office, at the 4th of July parade that my mother still organized. They had told my father's business partner. They had told the pastor at St. Michael's. They had told my aunt in Pittsburgh who, unlike the invented aunt in Portland, was real and was apparently already knitting a blanket for baby Noah. I closed my eyes. Does anyone know I was kicked out? Robbie's silence was its own answer. Does anyone know why I left? Ellie. Does anyone know they signed those papers, Robbie? The ones that removed me from the family legally? They what? They signed documents. I was 16. I kept them. I have them in a fireproof box in my house. He went very quiet. I didn't know that, he said finally. There's a lot you don't know, I said. Because they've been managing what you know the same way they manage what everyone else knows. He didn't argue. What are you going to do? He asked. I'm going to think about it, I said. And while I'm thinking, you're going to tell me something. When Mom comes to visit, and she is coming, isn't she? I can hear it in your voice. She's planning to come. He exhaled. She's talking about coming next month. With Dad? Dad doesn't know I called you. He thinks she called you herself. She didn't call me. I know. She asked me to. Of course. Plausible deniability, even within her own family. She asked you to gauge the temperature, I said. Yes. Tell her the temperature is fine. Tell her I'm open to a visit. You are? Tell her to come. Here is something I want to be honest with you about. This is the part of the story where I could have taken the high road. I could have called my mother directly. I could have had a quiet conversation. I could have said, I know what you've been telling people, and it needs to stop. And if you want a relationship with me and my son, it starts with truth. I could have done that. And maybe 15 years ago I would have. But I was 31 now. I was a woman who had built everything she had from nothing, while they built lies on her grave. And I thought about that 17-year-old in labor at Columbus General, who had no mother in the waiting room. I thought about the letter I sent when Noah was 3 weeks old that came back unopened. I thought about sitting in that car outside the house on Elm Creek Road, watching my father walk to his car with his golf bag and driving home alone. And I thought about 8 months of Noah's name in their mouths at church, a child they had never met, a grandson they were describing to strangers as if he were a gift they deserved. And I made a decision. I wasn't going to have a quiet conversation. I was going to let them come. I was going to let them believe it was exactly what they wanted. And then I was going to make sure that every person they had told those lies to heard the truth from me at a volume they couldn't ignore. I called my friend Dana Cho, who had lived 2 streets over in Millhaven and had been my best friend at 15 and had tracked me down via social media when I was 20 and never let me disappear again. I need your help, I said. Obviously, she said. What are we doing? I told her. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I have been waiting for this for 15 years. Tell me everything. I also called a woman named Karen Sloan. Karen was a journalist. Not a big network journalist, but she wrote a community column for the Columbus Dispatch and had broken 2 local stories in the past 3 years that had gotten statewide traction. She and I had crossed paths at a charity fundraiser and kept in touch. I laid out the situation for her. She asked sharp, clear questions. At the end, she said, if this goes the way you're describing, this is a story. I know, I said. Do you want it to be a story? I thought about 8 months of Noah's name in their mouths. Yes, I said. But I want to tell it on my terms. Your terms, she agreed. And that was that. Meanwhile, I set up what I will call, for lack of a better word, the archive. My fireproof box came out of the closet. Inside it, the family disestablishment documents from 2009, the legal papers my parents had signed to formally remove me as a dependent and severe legal ties. I'd gotten a copy when I was 18 through a legal aid clinic. My GED certificate, my CCAD diploma, the return to sender letter, the photos of Noah in the NICU, his birth certificate, my wedding photos, every one of them notable for a complete absence of anyone named Hart. I went through everything. I organized it, I scanned it all, I sent the scans to an encrypted folder that Karen and I both had access to. And then I waited. Before I tell you what happened next, and I promise you, what happened next is the part you came here for, I want to ask you something, because I think about this a lot. At what point does someone forfeit the right to be family? Is it a single decision? Is it the failure to undo that decision? Is it the years of silence? Or is it the moment you realize they were never protecting you? They were always just protecting themselves. My parents didn't come back because they missed me. They came back because they needed something from me. And I genuinely wonder, if they ever once, in 15 years, thought about what they'd done. Not what it meant for their reputation, what it meant for me, what it meant for a 16-year-old girl in November rain. Let me know what you think in the comments. Would you have let them in? Would you have just closed the door? Or would you have done exactly what I did? And if you're watching this and you've never subscribed, this is the moment, because the second half of this story is the part that broke the internet in our little corner of Ohio, and you do not want to miss it. My mother called me directly on a Wednesday. Her voice was warm and careful in a way that immediately told me she'd rehearsed. "Eleanor," she said, "it's Mom." As if I might not recognize her, as if 15 years might have erased her voice. "Hi," I said, neutral, calm. "I've been thinking about you so much." "Have you?" "Your father and we've had a lot of time to reflect. His health scare really put things in perspective for us." "I heard he's doing better." "He is, thank you. He misses you, Ellie. We both do." I let the silence sit for a moment before I said, "Robbie mentioned you wanted to visit." "We do, if you're open to it." "I'm open to it," I said. "Why don't you come up next Saturday?" She made a sound, a soft, relieved exhale, and said, "That would be wonderful." And then she said it. She said it so easily, so naturally, as if it were just the next logical sentence. We can't wait to meet little Noah. I looked at the wall. He's excited too, I said. A lie for a lie. We agreed on 2 p.m. She said, "Should we bring anything?" "Just yourselves," I said. What she didn't know was what was happening on my end. David knew everything. He was calm and deliberate and had one condition. Noah doesn't get hurt. Whatever happens, he doesn't know it's anything other than meeting extended family. Agreed, I said. Noah knew that my parents had been out of touch for a long time. I'd always been honest with him about the fact that I had family we didn't see. I'd never told him the details. He was 9. The details could come later, in pieces, age-appropriately. For Saturday, he just knew some grandparents were coming to visit. He was mildly interested. He was more interested in Cosmo's new squeaky toy. I was counting on that. I also called one more person, my aunt in Pittsburgh, my real aunt, my father's sister, Margaret, who I had not spoken to since I was a child, but who had, apparently, been told by my mother that Noah and I were already in regular contact with my parents. Aunt Margaret was warm on the phone. She immediately said, "Your mother told me you'd reconciled months ago. She said you and your son were doing wonderfully and that you'd been up to visit." "Margaret," I said gently, "I need to tell you some things." I told her everything, from the beginning. She was quiet for a very long time. Then she said, "Eleanor, I had no idea. I am so sorry. I thought, your mother said—" "I know what she said," I told her. "I have proof of what actually happened. And I think, after Saturday, you should probably see it." "Yes," she said. "I think I should." Dana drove up from Millhaven on Friday night. She stayed in our guest room. We sat at the kitchen table until midnight going through the plan. She had her own information, things I didn't know. "You know she threw a party, right?" Dana said. I stared at her. "Your mom, 2 months ago. She threw a birthday party for Noah." "His birthday was in August." "I know. This was in January. She had a cake and everything. Said you were bringing him up next time. She showed pictures." "Pictures of what?" Dana slid her phone across the table. There was a photo of a cake. White fondant, blue trim. In blue letters, "Happy birthday, Noah, Grandma and Grandpa's little boy." I looked at it for a long time. "She bought a cake," I said, "for a child she has never met. And she served it to people and took pictures." "And posted it to Facebook," Dana said. "It has 67 likes, 5 comments, including one from the pastor's wife that says, 'So precious.'" I looked at David. He shook his head slowly. "Okay," I said. I took a screenshot. 67 likes. The pastor's wife. So precious. Saturday morning, I made one more call. Karen Sloan. "They're coming at 2, I said. "I'll be nearby," she said. "I want you to have everything before they arrive." "I do." "And after," she said, "you can decide how much you want public and how much you keep. But I'll be ready." "Thank you, Karen." "Don't thank me yet," she said. "Thank me when it's done." At noon on Saturday, David took Noah to the park. I had 2 hours alone in the house. I sat in the kitchen. I looked at the refrigerator where Noah's drawing of Cosmo still hung. I thought about 16-year-old me. I thought about what I would tell her, if I could. I think I would tell her, "You are going to be okay, more than okay, and they are going to knock on your door one day looking for what you built, and you will be ready." At 1:58 p.m., a silver Cadillac pulled up in front of my house. My father had always driven Cadillacs. He got out first. He was 64 now, heavier than I remembered, gray at the temples. He stood by the car and straightened his jacket. My mother got out on the passenger side. She was wearing her best clothes. She was carrying white lilies. She was glowing. She looked up at the house, my house, the house I owned in the neighborhood I had chosen, and she smiled. And she walked up the path, and she knocked on my door, and I opened it. She looked exactly as I remembered, and also completely different. Older, yes, more careful around the eyes, but the smile was the same, practiced, warm, controlled. She said, "Eleanor." She said it like a gift. "Mom," I said. My father hung back slightly. He met my eyes and nodded, a nod that was supposed to say we're past all that without him having to say a single word. My mother held out the lilies. I took them. I stepped back from the door. I said, "Come in." They came in. My mother looked around the front hall, the framed photos on the wall, the hooks with Noah's backpack, Cosmo's leash, David's running shoes, and her face did something complicated, something between surprised and impressed. "This is beautiful," she said. "Thank you." "Your home is lovely." "Thank you." My father cleared his throat and looked at a photo on the wall. Noah's school portrait from 3rd grade. He leaned in, said nothing. I let the silence sit for exactly 4 seconds. Then I said, "Sit down." They sat on the couch. I sat in the chair across from them. And my mother looked toward the hallway and said, with that warm, practiced smile, "Is Noah home?" "He'll be back soon," I said. "I wanted to talk to you first." A flicker in her eyes, brief, gone. "Of course," she said. "There's so much to catch up on." "There is," I agreed. "Let's start with this." I reached to the side table. I had a folder. Inside it were 3 things: the return to sender letter, a printed screenshot of the Facebook birthday cake post, and the legal disestablishment papers. I slid the folder across the coffee table. She looked at it. She didn't touch it. "What is this?" she said. "That," I said, "is a letter I sent you when Noah was 3 weeks old. You sent it back." She glanced at my father. "Eleanor, that was a long time ago." "Flip to the 2nd page." She looked at my father again. He picked up the folder. He opened it. I watched his face when he saw the birthday cake photo. I watched my mother's face when he showed it to her. "Where did you get this?" she said. "You posted it on Facebook," I said. "It has 67 likes." You threw a birthday party for a child you've never met, and you told your guests he was your grandchild." "I was just hoping." Flip to the last page. My father turned to the legal documents, the disestablishment papers. His signature, her signature. November 2009. He put the folder down. The room was very quiet. "Those papers," my mother said carefully, "were drawn up in a very emotional time. They removed me from the family legally," I said. "I was 16 years old and pregnant and—" "You didn't sign. You were the subject. I know what I was," I said. "I know exactly what I was." My father put his hands on his knees. "Eleanor," he said, and his voice was different from my mother's. Older, tireder. "We made mistakes. I understand that. I hope you can believe that I I want to ask you a direct question, I said. All right. Did you tell people in Millhaven that you had a relationship with my son? He pressed his lips together. Your mother has mentioned— Did you? A pause. We've talked about Noah, yes. Did you tell them you'd met him? Silence. Did you tell people you were in his life, that he knew you, that we were a family? My mother said, Eleanor, we were trying to create an opportunity. You lied, I said. You built an 8-month lie. You had people believing we were a family. You posted a birthday cake. You had the pastor's wife call my child precious. We just wanted— I know what you wanted, I said. You wanted the ending. You wanted to come to the funeral with a reconciliation story. You wanted to walk into church with the wayward daughter returned. You wanted Noah as a prop in the last chapter of your reputation. My mother's eyes filled. I watched her carefully. I had watched that face for 31 years. I knew when she was crying for herself. That's not fair, she said. Was it fair? I said quietly. When you pointed at the door? The room was absolutely still. Was it fair when you sent that letter back? Was it fair when you let an entire town believe I'd moved to Portland? Was it fair when you signed papers erasing your own daughter? My father had gone pale. Was it fair? I said. When your grandson was born and you weren't there? Because you'd spent 3 weeks deciding he didn't exist. My mother was crying now. My father was staring at the floor. I kept everything, I said. I kept every piece of paper. I kept the letter. I kept the documents. And I'm going to give you one chance to decide what comes next. What do you mean? My mother said. I mean you have a choice, I said. You can go back to Millhaven and you can tell those people the truth. You tell them what you did in 2009. You tell them about the papers. You tell them there was no reconciliation. There was no contact. There was no relationship with Noah. Because you had made sure there couldn't be. Eleanor, or, I said, you say nothing. And I release everything I have to someone who will make sure the whole town reads it. My father looked up. You wouldn't, he said. And I realized, after 31 years, he still didn't know me at all. Gerald, I said. It was the first time I had ever called him by his first name. He blinked. I walked out of your driveway with $83 and 1 suitcase. I raised Noah alone. I built this house. I built this life. There is nothing I wouldn't do. The room was silent for a very long time. My mother was crying into a tissue. My father had his hands clasped between his knees, like a man in a waiting room. And then the back door opened, and Noah came in, with David behind him and Cosmo charging ahead. And Noah stopped when he saw 2 strangers on the couch and said, Oh, are these the grandparents? And he looked at them with the open, uncomplicated curiosity of a 9-year-old. And my mother looked at him, and for a moment, just a moment, I saw something on her face that might have been genuine. Not calculation, not strategy, just a woman looking at her grandson for the first time, 15 years too late. I said, Noah, this is Gerald and Patricia. They're going to have some things to take care of before we figure out what we all are to each other. Noah nodded seriously. He held out his hand to my father, the way David had taught him to greet adults, and said, "Hi, I'm Noah." My father shook his hand. He didn't say anything. He looked like a man who had just understood, for the first time, what he had missed. They left 30 minutes later. My mother hugged me at the door, a stiff, uncertain hug that felt like the first honest thing she had done all afternoon. She said quietly, "I'm sorry, Eleanor. I know that's not enough." "No," I said, "it's not, but it's a start." She nodded. They walked down the path. I watched the Cadillac pull away. I closed the door. David was behind me. I turned around. He opened his arms. I walked into them. And I stood there for a long time, very still, in the hallway of my own house. What came next happened faster than I expected. My father called Robbie that night. Robbie called me. "What happened?" he asked. "They know what I have," I said, "and they know what I'll do with it." "Ellie, Robbie, they built a lie for 8 months. People deserve to know." "I know," he said quietly. "I know." "Will you support whatever they decide to do next?" "Yes," he said. "Actually, yes, I will." On Monday, my mother sent a message to her church women's group. I don't have the exact words. I wasn't in the group, but Dana was. She forwarded it to me. It was 3 paragraphs. It said, she had not been truthful about her relationship with her daughter, that the estrangement was her fault, that the stories she had shared about her grandson were not accurate because she had not, in fact, had any relationship with her daughter or her grandson for many years, that she was asking forgiveness. Dana called me after. The group chat, she said, went completely silent for 4 minutes. "How long is 4 minutes in a church women's group chat?" I asked. "About 400 years," she said. My father made a similar statement, less detailed, more formal, to his business partner and to the pastor at St. Michael's. The pastor, apparently, asked to speak with him privately. I was not present for that conversation, but Robbie told me our father came home from it looking like a man who had confessed, which, I suppose, is what it was. Karen Sloan's article ran the following Thursday. She was careful with it. She did not name the town directly. She used first names only. She told the story of a woman who was removed from her family as a teenager, who built her life independently, and who was later approached by her family to fill a role in a narrative they had built without her knowledge or consent. She included the birthday cake image. She quoted me, "Family is what you build, not just what you're born into. And the people who tried to build a family using my name without my presence for 15 years, they need to understand that you don't get to claim the harvest if you burn down the field." The article was shared 400 times by the following weekend. Several Ohio news outlets picked it up. A national parenting blog republished a condensed version. One comment thread on a Facebook share had over 600 replies. The top comment said, "I hope that little boy knows how loved he is by the mother who stayed." I screenshot that one. I kept it. Here is where I have to be honest with you about the messy part. Because this isn't a movie. There is no clean ending. There is no moment where my mother becomes a different person and all the years fold back and everyone cries and it's fine. That's not how this works. My parents and I are in something. I don't know what to call it. Not reconciliation, not forgiveness, not a relationship. Something more like a careful negotiation. My mother calls once a week now. The calls are short, cautious. She doesn't mention the church or the casseroles or the women's auxiliary. She asks about Noah. She asks about David. She asks about work. And occasionally, not always, but occasionally, she says something that sounds like the real her, not the practiced version, the underneath version. Last month, she said, "I look at pictures of you at CCAD graduation that I found online. You looked so proud. I should have been there." I said, "Yes, you should have." She said, "I'm sorry I wasn't." And I said, "I know." That was the whole conversation. But it was real, and real is something. My father is harder. He doesn't call on his own. He comes on the phone when my mother passes it to him. He says very little. But 3 weeks ago, he sent me a card in the mail, handwritten, 4 sentences. "Eleanor, I have not been a good father. I don't expect you to forgive me quickly. I hope you'll allow me to try." I showed it to David. He read it and said, "What do you want to do with that?" "I don't know yet," I said. I put it in the fireproof box with everything else. Noah knows more now. Not everything. He's 9, and 9-year-olds don't need everything. But he knows that I left home when I was young because things weren't safe. He knows I had people who helped me, Carol, Marcus, Dr. Tanaka, who became family. He knows that the people who came to the house are trying. He was quiet when I told him. Then he said, "Were you scared when you were 16? "Yes," I said. "But you did it anyway." "Yes." He thought about that for a moment. Then he said, "That's what brave is, right? Doing it anyway?" I pulled him into a hug. I held him for a long time, and I thought, yes, my love, that is exactly what brave is. Carol Webb came for dinner last Sunday. She is 61 now. She still wears reading glasses on a beaded chain. She sat at my dining room table and ate the pot roast I made and told Noah embarrassing stories about his father at 17. Noah was delighted. David pretended to be mortified. I watched them all and felt the thing I have felt more and more lately. This right here. This is the whole thing. This is the family I built. From nothing. From a driveway. From November rain. I want to leave you with something true. Not inspirational in a cheap way, just true. The world will tell you that family is sacred, that blood is thicker than water, that you should forgive, that parents always love their children even when they don't act like it. And maybe some of that is true. But here is what I know from 31 years of living. Some people will only come back to you when they need something from you. And when they do, they will dress it up as love. They will bring white lilies. They will smile at the door. They will say words like reconcile and reflect and miss you. And you will have to look very carefully, not at what they're saying, at what they did. At the letter that came back unopened, at the papers they signed, at the years they spent building a story in which you were both the villain and the ghost. And you will have to decide, for yourself, what you owe people who once decided you were nothing. I have not decided to love my parents again. I am not sure I know how yet. But I have decided something else. I have decided that the story they tried to write, the one where I was the wayward daughter who disappeared, the one where Noah was their triumph, the one where they got the ending without living through the middle, that story is not the one that gets told. This is the one that gets told. The one with the pull-out couch. The one with the waitressing shifts. The one with the 7 a.m. design critiques and the graduation that no one from my family attended. The one with Noah's dark hair and enormous eyes and the stuffed elephant named Gerald. The one with David on one knee on a Saturday morning while Noah poured his cereal. The one with Carol Webb at my dining room table, reading glasses on a beaded chain, telling stories. That is the story, and it is mine. So if you are out there right now, and I know some of you are, carrying a story that someone tried to erase, I want you to hear this. You are the author, not them. They can show up with lilies and rehearsed apologies and church friends who believe the clean version. But you have the box. You have the documents. You have the dates and the names and the cold tile and the November rain. You have every single brick. And you have built something real, something they can't take, something they can only knock on the door of and hope that you'll let them in. My name is Ellie Hart. I'm 31 years old. I have a son who knows what brave means, a husband who makes the coffee, a dog who has destroyed 5 pairs of shoes now, not 4, and a fireproof box that I no longer need to open. Because the truth isn't locked away anymore. It's right here. You're watching it.